Hi friends, we are back in our poetry unit. So you need out in front of you this poetry book here, reader writer notebook, and again it says poetry on the front. If you do not have one of these books, please go ahead and take out a separate sheet of paper so that you can follow along with us. So we are doing a little bit of review. We are going to page 11 and 12. So there is a poem on 11 and 12 has some work for us to do. So I am just going to do a little bit of review and then move on. So last week you were supposed to complete a close reading of the poem On Turning 10 by Billy Collins. So you were reading that closely yourself, and if we look here, our directions told us, let's focus this up for you. Sorry. There we go. Okay, so if we completed a close reading, we knew that when we read closely, we read with our pencil in hand, marking up the text as I go, read the text multiple times, each time with a new purpose, and then lastly, read, write, and talk about the poem a lot. So I did not get responses from a lot of people, so I'm going to do a mini review on this, and I'm going to give you the chance to go ahead and complete this again today for an activity. So we are going to backtrack a little bit and do lesson 6 through 8 in the upcoming week. So if we look on page 12, we found a word bank at the top, and remember how I had you mark it with a 1 and a 2? So our structural was the 1 and our figurative was 2. So if we remember, we had structural was rhythm, meter, and verse. And if we were a little unsure on that, we could go back to page 5. Page 5 gave us some examples, and it also helped us to better understand those 3 words. Or you can go back in our lessons and you can rewatch them so you can catch up also. And then we had the second side, which was figurative, and this is our figurative language: alliteration, repetition, personification, simile, and metaphor. And I will post all of those again today, so keep a lookout on Facebook and keep a lookout on Dojo, because I will repost some of those things for us today. So our first task, I wrote them on stickies for us. Our first task was to read closely On Turning 10. So that was the poem that was found on page 11. So if you did not do that yet, that's your first task, to read closely that poem on page 11. When you were done, task number 2 was the phase 1. Answer that question. So if I go to phase 1, the question says, what does the poem say? And it gives me a second question. What is the structural makeup of the poem? I gave you a little tidbit here, a little side note, 1 for structural. So if I go back to the top where word bank and structural is, it's asking me what is the makeup of the poem in these terms. So where do you find the rhythm? How are the meters broken up? What are the verses? So take a look at that again. Send me your responses for that. And then I'm going to ask you to turn to page 13. Alrighty, there we go. Perfect. So if we go to page 13 and we look on 13, 13 says phase 2, lens, word choice. How does figurative language impact the poem? Use 2 figurative terms and details from the poem to support your understanding. So this is our move on for today. You are moving on to this question. How does figurative language impact the poem? And you need to use 2 figurative terms. So I gave you another little hint, 2 for figurative. So if I go back to page 12, and I see figurative here where I put my number 2, use these words here, any of these that we have learned so far, to describe the poem. So where do you see alliteration in the poem? Where is there repetition? Are there similes, metaphors? If there are, underline them, highlight them, circle them, and write them down in your response on page 13. I hope that makes sense. again, if you are lost, confused, rewind these videos because you can watch them over and over and over again. So our objective for last time, if we look quickly here, our reading objective for last time was that I can read closely. That is going to be your objective again today. If you remember, the top of that page 12 says in order to read closely, you need to read the poem multiple times. So I'm challenging you today to reread that poem for another time so you get a new point of view while you're reading. Also, I can identify the structural makeup of the poem. That's what you were asked to do last time. And I'm going to add that I can identify how figurative language impacts the poem. So that will be another learning objective for today. You can identify how figurative language impacts the poem. All right, friends, that is all I have for you today. Short and sweet. Again, rewatch this. If you need to slow down, you can pause, stop, move forward, move back as many times as you need to throughout the poem. So your task today is page 13 in your Reader-Writer notebook. Page 13. That is your must-do for today. You must complete page 13. And again, send me those. Whatever you have, send it on over to me. I did mention last week I'm taking it a little slower. I'm going to slow down a little bit. I'm going to do not as much in one day. I'm going to condense it down to smaller tasks in a day so that we don't overwhelm ourselves. I'll talk to you guys soon.